Imagine standing on a cliff 400 meters above the desert floor. Behind you, your family, your wife, your children. Around you, 960 souls who have chosen this desolate rock as their final refuge. And below, stretching across the sand in every direction as far as you can see, 15,000 Roman soldiers. The most disciplined, most lethal fighting force the ancient world has ever produced. They have built 8 military camps around your mountain. They have constructed a wall of stone encircling the entire base so that not a single person can escape. And now, day after day, week after week, you watch them do something that defies belief. They are building a ramp. A ramp made of earth and timber, rising from the desert floor toward your walls, carrying with it a battering ram and a siege tower bristling with weapons. You cannot stop them. You cannot fight them. You cannot run. And when that ramp reaches the top, everyone you love will either be enslaved or killed. This is not a movie. This is not fiction. This is the Siege of Masada. And what happened on the night before the Romans broke through the walls is one of the most haunting, controversial, and debated events in all of ancient history. To understand what happened at Masada, we need to go back about 100 years before the siege, to a king so paranoid, so consumed by fear of assassination and revolt, that he built himself a fortress on top of an almost unreachable cliff in the middle of the Judean Desert. His name was Herod the Great. Between 37 and 31 BC, Herod transformed this natural rock plateau into one of the most remarkable fortifications in the ancient world. The plateau itself is shaped like a diamond, roughly 550 meters long and 270 meters wide, with sheer cliffs dropping away on every side. On the eastern face, the drop is a staggering 400 meters. Herod built 2 grand palaces here. The northern palace was his masterpiece, a 3-tiered structure carved directly into the cliff face, with painted frescoes, Roman-style bathhouses with hot and cold pools, and terraces offering breathtaking views across the Dead Sea. But Masada was not just a luxury retreat. Herod was building for survival. He constructed massive storerooms capable of holding enough food to sustain 1,000 people for years: grain, wine, oil, and dates. He engineered an ingenious water system. Channels carved into the cliff face collected rainwater and directed it into enormous cisterns with a combined capacity of 40,000 cubic meters. He surrounded the entire plateau with a fortification wall over a kilometer long, 4 meters high, reinforced with 37 guard towers. And most importantly, there was only one natural path up to the top, a narrow, winding trail called the Snake Path, so treacherous that men could not walk it side by side. Herod built Masada as his last resort, the place he would flee to if the world turned against him. As it turned out, he never needed it. But decades after his death, someone else would. By the year 66 AD, the Jewish people of Judea had endured decades of Roman occupation. Roman governors had taxed them relentlessly. Roman soldiers had desecrated their sacred spaces. And when the Roman procurator Gessius Florus seized 17 talents of silver from the temple treasury in Jerusalem, the most sacred site in Judaism, it was the final breaking point. The Jewish people revolted. What followed was a brutal, province-wide rebellion known as the First Jewish-Roman War. In the early months, the rebels achieved something extraordinary. They defeated a Roman legion. At the Battle of Beth Horon in October of 66 AD, Jewish fighters ambushed and routed the 12th Legion under Cestius Gallus, killing some 6,000 Roman soldiers and capturing their standards. It was a humiliation Rome could not let stand. Emperor Nero dispatched one of his finest generals, Vespasian, with a massive army to crush the revolt. City by city, fortress by fortress, Vespasian and later his son Titus dismantled the rebellion. Galilee fell. Then the countryside. And then, in the summer of 70 AD, the Romans besieged Jerusalem itself. The fall of Jerusalem was catastrophic. The Romans breached the walls, burned the Second Temple, the spiritual heart of Judaism, to the ground and massacred or enslaved the population. The city was razed. The war, for all practical purposes, was over. But not entirely. A small group of rebels, a radical faction called the Sicarii, had escaped the carnage. Led by a man named Eleazar ben Yair, they fled south through the desert to the one place they believed the Romans could never reach: Herod's abandoned fortress on top of a cliff, Masada. The Sicarii had actually seized Masada back in 66 AD, at the very beginning of the revolt, overwhelming the small Roman garrison stationed there. After the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, more refugees joined them: families, women, children, bringing the total population to around 960 people. And here, on this isolated rock above the Dead Sea, they built a community. They found Herod's storerooms still stocked with provisions, remarkably well preserved in the dry desert air, even after nearly a century. They had weapons from Herod's armory. They had water from the cistern system. They modified one of Herod's buildings into a synagogue, orienting it toward Jerusalem, a poignant detail, given that the temple was now in ruins. For nearly 2 years, the defenders of Masada lived in a kind of tense isolation. They could look out from their walls and see the Dead Sea shimmering to the east and the vast desert stretching in every direction. They were free, but they were trapped, and they knew that eventually Rome would come for them. In the winter of 72 AD, Rome came. Lucius Flavius Silva, the Roman governor of Judea, arrived at the base of Masada with an overwhelming force. The 10th Legion, the famed Legio X Fretensis, along with several auxiliary units and thousands of Jewish prisoners of war forced into labor. In total, an estimated 15,000 men and women, of whom 8,000 to 9,000 were combat troops. For 960 people on a cliff, this was the full weight of the Roman Empire bearing down on them. Silva's first move was textbook Roman military doctrine: containment. His soldiers constructed a circumvallation wall, a continuous wall of stone encircling the entire base of the mountain. This wall, combined with 8 military camps positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, ensured that no one could escape Masada, and no supplies could get in. The message was clear. There would be no negotiation, no compromise. Rome would wait as long as it took. But Silva was not a patient man. A simple blockade could take months, perhaps years, given the defenders' ample supplies. So he devised something far more ambitious, something that, 2,000 years later, still stands as one of the most astonishing feats of military engineering in history. He decided to build a ramp. On the western face of the mountain, where the cliff was at its lowest point, still roughly 100 meters above the desert floor, Roman engineers identified a natural rock spur. Using this as a foundation, they began constructing a massive earthen ramp, reinforced with timber beams. Thousands of laborers, many of them Jewish prisoners, hauled earth, stone, and wood up the slopes under the desert sun, day after day. The ramp grew slowly, relentlessly. Historical estimates suggest the Romans moved approximately 500,000 tons of material to build it. The finished ramp was over 200 meters long and rose to nearly the height of the fortress walls. Here is a detail that reveals the terrible psychology of the siege. The defenders on top of Masada could do nothing to stop the construction. According to the historian Josephus, our only written source for these events, the Sicarii did not attempt to attack the Roman work parties. Some historians believe this was because the Romans deliberately used Jewish prisoners as laborers, knowing that the defenders would be reluctant to kill their own people. By the spring of 73 AD, after 2 to 3 months of construction, the ramp was complete. With the ramp finished, the Romans hauled a massive ironclad siege tower up its surface. The tower was equipped with a battering ram and platforms from which soldiers could fire projectiles, stone ballista balls and iron bolts, down onto the defenders. It was a moving fortress, and it was aimed directly at Masada's wall. The battering rams struck, again and again. The outer stone wall crumbled. But the defenders had anticipated this. Behind the breached stone wall, they had hastily constructed a second wall, this one made of timber and packed earth. It was designed to absorb the impact of the battering ram, flexing rather than shattering. For a moment, it seemed to work. The Romans adapted. They launched a barrage of flaming torches at the timber wall. The wood caught fire. According to Josephus, the wind initially blew the flames back toward the Romans, threatening their own siege tower. But then the wind shifted, driving the fire directly into the wooden wall. The defenders' last physical barrier was consumed by flames. On April the 16th, 73 AD, the breach was complete. The Romans would enter Masada the next morning. That night, Eleazar ben Yair gathered his people. What happened on the final night at Masada is the most debated and emotionally charged chapter of this story. Our only account comes from Josephus, who was not present himself but claimed to have received the story from 2 women and 5 children who survived by hiding inside a water cistern. According to Josephus, Eleazar assembled the defenders and delivered a speech, a plea for what he called a glorious death rather than a life of infamy under Roman chains. He argued that their wives would face violation, their children would be sold into slavery, and they themselves would be tortured or forced to fight as gladiators for Roman entertainment. He urged them to deny Rome this final victory. The decision was made. Because Jewish law prohibited suicide, the defenders devised a system. 10 men were chosen by lot to carry out the act. Each family said their farewells. Husbands embraced their wives and children one last time. Then the 10 chosen men went through the fortress, and one by one, the 960 people of Masada died at the hands of their own. The 10 then drew lots again among themselves. One man would be the last. He would set fire to the fortress, sparing only the food storerooms, so that the Romans would know they had not died of starvation but by deliberate choice. And then he would take his own life. When the Roman soldiers poured through the breach at dawn, ready for battle, ready for screams and resistance, they found silence. The buildings were in flames, and in the rooms and corridors of Herod's once magnificent fortress, they found the bodies. Josephus wrote that the Romans, expecting victory, instead felt something closer to awe. They did not celebrate. They stood in silence. Now, we need to be honest about the history here. Josephus is our only written source, and he was a complicated figure, a Jewish commander who had surrendered to the Romans and later became their historian. His account carries obvious biases and dramatic embellishments. Modern archaeology has both confirmed and complicated his narrative. When Israeli archaeologist Yigael Yadin excavated Masada in the 1960s, he found evidence of fire, personal belongings, and pottery shards with names scratched on them, possibly the lots used to choose the final 10. He also found remains of individuals in a cave on the southern cliff. But scholars like Shay Cohen have argued that the archaeological evidence suggests the reality was messier than Josephus describes. Some defenders may have fought the Romans. Some may have tried to hide and escape. The Romans, in the aftermath, were likely not in a mood for mercy. The truth, as with so much of ancient history, lies somewhere between the written record and the physical evidence. What is not debated is the significance of what happened here. The Roman military strategist Edward Luttwak argued that Rome's massive investment at Masada, deploying 15,000 people to eliminate 960, was itself a message. Rome would pursue resistance to the very last person, no matter the cost, no matter how strategically insignificant the target. Masada was not just a siege, it was a statement. Today, Masada stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Roman siege camps, the circumvallation wall, and the massive ramp are still visible, among the most complete examples of Roman military engineering anywhere in the world. Nearly 750,000 people visit each year. For the modern state of Israel, Masada became a powerful national symbol, a story of resistance, of choosing freedom over submission, of a people who refused to surrender even when all hope was gone. Israeli soldiers once took their oath at the summit with the words, "Masada shall not fall again." Whether you see Masada as a story of heroism, of tragedy, of fanaticism, or of the crushing machinery of empire, it remains one of the most extraordinary last stands in all of human history. 960 people on a cliff, 15,000 soldiers below, and a choice that still echoes 2,000 years later. If this story moved you, or if it made you think, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you're not subscribed to Historical Club yet, now is the time. We bring you the most incredible stories from history, told the way they deserve to be told. Subscribe, turn on the bell so you never miss a video, and drop a comment below. I want to know, Do you see the defenders of Masada as heroes, or do you think the truth is more complicated than that? Let's have that conversation. Until next time, this is Historical Club.